To her face, I was the best big brother in the world, but behind my back, she tore me down. In my past life, she was the reason my family was ruined and I died consumed by hatred. This time, when she left her groom at the altar and ran to me, I met her with cold indifference, extinguishing any hope she had. My revenge was never about simply turning her away. It was about making her realize she was no longer in my league. On her wedding day, my childhood sweetheart called the whole thing off and, in front of everyone, confessed her love for me. I knew it in that instant. She had come back just like me. In our last life, she fell for an illegitimate son who played her for a fool, taking everything she had. He and her stepsister worked together, systematically draining her family of its entire fortune. Only in her final moments did she understand that the one person who had truly loved her all along was me. But in this life, I was the one who got a second chance. On Ava's wedding day, the church was filled with a solemn, sacred air. A band played a slow, elegant piano melody, the exact kind of music Ava always loved. I sat in the pews, my eyes fixed on her at the altar. She was in a flowing white gown, a veil partially obscuring her delicate features. Her makeup was perfect, making her seem impossibly beautiful. She was smiling, a look of pure bliss that said she was marrying the love of her life. And the man standing across from her was the groom, James, my father's illegitimate son, and the man Ava had been obsessed with for more than 10 years. Ava once told me James made her feel different. She said her life of privilege was suffocating, and only something as simple as a bowl of porridge he made for her could make her feel warm inside. And today, she was bringing her mother's entire inheritance with her as she married him in a lavish ceremony. The ceremony unfolded flawlessly, as if rehearsed 100 times. Everything was going according to plan until the pastor turned to Ava and asked if she was ready to recite her vows. That's when her face changed. She bolted from the altar, stumbling down the steps in a panic. Her long train nearly tripped her, but she hiked it up and kept running, as if terrified that another second would mean losing something irreplaceable. I watched her run toward me, a strange sense of calm washing over me. The moment her delicate fingers were about to brush against my arm, I shifted to the side. The light in her eyes flickered and died for an instant, but she quickly composed herself, lifting her chin with a look of forced indifference, even as her eyes turned red. "Ethan, I made a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "I only want to be with you. I love you, and I know you love me." I shot a look at James, who had rushed down after her. My voice was ice, sharp and final. "You're his wife now, Ava. Please, have some self-respect." Then I turned and left without another word. Ava screamed my name, trying to follow, but the heavy train of her dress tangled around her legs. Her new husband, the man she just married, seized her wrist, holding her back so she couldn't get any closer to me. I was sure of it. Ava had been reborn, just like me. In our last life, she had fallen for James so hard that she dropped out of college for him and even had an abortion. She even broke off our engagement, defying the wishes of the entire Anderson family, just to marry my father's illegitimate son. Her mother had passed away years ago, leaving her a massive inheritance that was set to transfer to her name the moment she married. James needed a huge injection of cash to make a play against the Anderson family fortune, so he targeted Ava. They'd been seeing each other secretly since high school, and it wasn't long before she got pregnant. James convinced her to have an abortion, and she went along with it, but the procedure left her infertile. Even after she ended our engagement, I still watched over her from afar. Her stepmother and stepsister, Hannah, made her life hell, constantly cutting off her allowance. I'd send her gifts and wire her money, doing anything I could to make her happy, but the moment she felt better, she'd run straight back to James. I used to tell myself that loving someone didn't mean you had to own them, that just protecting her was a kind of love, too. But all Ava ever said to me, with a smile, was, "Ethan, you're like a brother to me, the best brother anyone could ask for." But behind my back, in a group chat with her friends, she'd say things like, "Ethan's just like a puppy. He comes when I call and gets lost when I tell him to." After she married James, she stole my research and gave it to him as a wedding present. A new product my company was about to launch was suddenly announced as his. My company was plunged in a crisis, while James used my work to become the new golden boy of the tech industry. He was relentless. While he was systematically destroying my company, he also went after my mother. He stormed into her hospital room like a lunatic and screamed at her as she lay there, weak and frail. "This is all your fault. You're the reason my mother and I were humiliated our entire lives. My father loved my mother. You were just the other woman," he yelled. "You and Ethan both deserve to die." The shock was too much for my mother's fragile health. She lost consciousness and never woke up. With his newfound power, James sent assassins after me. I got lucky and survived. My company was on the ropes, but I still had a fighting chance to turn things around. It was at that critical juncture that Ava asked to meet me. The location was the roof of an 18-story building in downtown Chicago. Her face was a mess of tears as she sobbed. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. But if I don't do this, he's going to leave me. I'm the one who stole your research. Ethan, I'm sorry," she cried. "If I get another chance, I promise I won't do it again." And with that, she pushed me off the edge of the roof. As I fell, all I could do was stare up at her, my mind reeling with shock and a profound, chilling sense of betrayal. My throat closed up, and I couldn't even scream. After I died, James didn't protect her like she'd hoped. He immediately turned on her, telling the police she was the one who had murdered me. With the evidence stacked against her, Ava was convicted and sent to prison. Her stepsister, Hannah, visited her in prison, holding a positive pregnancy test. "Did you really think James would ever love a barren woman like you?" she sneered. "Let me tell you a secret. It was always me he wanted. While you were fighting with your family for him, we were sleeping together," Hannah continued. "You were so stupid, stealing Ethan's work for him. The only person in this world who ever truly cared about you is Ethan. And you didn't just betray him, you killed him with your own 2 hands." The light faded from Ava's eyes, her spirit completely broken. She ended up taking her own life in her cell. I watched it all happen from some place beyond, my heart turning to ice. All I felt was a cold, hard emptiness. I never thought I'd open my eyes again, but fate gave me another chance. This time, I wouldn't make the same mistakes. I wouldn't waste my life treasuring something worthless. After leaving the church, I drove straight to the hospital. Seeing my mother in her room, her face pale, but her expression as gentle as ever, I felt a sting in my nose and my eyes began to burn. In my past life, her health had been getting better. But then James stormed into her room, and his vicious tirade sent her into a decline from which she never recovered. The doctors did everything they could, but they couldn't bring her back. Her voice was as soft as I remembered. "Ethan, what is it? I thought you were at the wedding." I sat down on the edge of her bed and took her hand, managing a weak smile. "It wasn't important," I said quietly. So I left. A shadow passed over my mother's eyes, and she sighed. "Ethan, there are some things in life you can't force." She squeezed my hand. "Ava isn't the one for you. You need a partner who can stand with you as an equal, not a child you have to take care of." I understood her perfectly. "I know, Mom," I said, nodding. "I'm over Ava. I won't make that mistake again." She patted my hand with her frail one, offering a silent comfort. I felt that familiar sting in my nose again and quickly made an excuse about work before leaving the room. I made a silent promise. "This time, Mom, I won't let anyone hurt you." Her condition was too fragile to move her, and we were already at the best hospital in the country, Mount Sinai. So I hired a team of professional bodyguard from a top security firm to stand watch outside her room around the clock. Other than her doctors and nurses, nobody was getting in. Once that was taken care of, I went back to my company, Zeus Tech. The top floor housed my private lab, staffed with the brightest minds in biotechnology I'd recruited from across the nation. Our flagship project was on the verge of a breakthrough. Drawing on my memories from the last life, I finished compiling the final data set in under 2 hours. I've been working on this fusion of biology and technology since I was in high school. Last time, I had finally found the perfect data sequence for human integration. The technology, which I called the AI brain, would allow for a seamless merger between the human mind and a digital interface. It was a true brain-computer connection, enabling a person's thoughts to operate with the speed and logic of a processor. In my past life, James had stolen only the final product, rushing the AI brain to market and costing my company billions in investor funding. Our stock price tanked. But what he didn't have and couldn't create was my proprietary firewall. I had delayed the launch precisely because I hadn't finished deploying the final encryption for that firewall. But James was always one to cut corners for a quick profit, and he had no idea what kind of danger he was unleashing. At first, his limited release of the AI brain was a massive success. He became an overnight sensation. But as more people started using the device, the lack of a firewall made it an easy target, and hackers breached the system. The consequences were catastrophic. Users had their neural data stolen and manipulated. Some were left brain dead. The victims included celebrities, politicians, and industry leaders. James's reputation was destroyed in a single day. By then, I had finished the firewall and was about to use it to relaunch and save my company. But that's when Ava lured me to that rooftop, and that's where I died. Now, standing in my lab, my team of experts stared at the completed code, their eyes wide with disbelief. "Boss, you're an absolute genius," one of them exclaimed. "You wrote the entire thing in just a few hours." Another added, "My God, Mr. Anderson, you work at an impossible speed." I just smiled and shook my head. The truth was, I had already perfected this final piece of the puzzle in my last life. This time, with my team's support, I was just walking a path I already knew by heart. That evening, the whole lab team went out to celebrate at a private room in a fancy restaurant downtown. The drinks were flowing, and these brilliant scientists were acting like kids on Christmas morning, flushed with excitement and hugging each other, ecstatic that years of hard work had finally borne fruit. I slipped out of the room for some air, using the classic going for a smoke excuse. I didn't expect to run into Ava on the balcony. She was there with her friends, and they were so loud you could hear them from the other end of the hall. I was about to head back, but then I overheard her. "I'm only going to marry Ethan in this life," she declared. "You all have to help me figure out how." One of her friends chimed in instantly. "Honey, you're gorgeous. Even I have a girl crush on you. There's no way he's not interested. He's just jealous you were about to marry James." Another one laughed. "Go sweet-talk him a little. He's been wrapped around your finger for years. He'll cave." A third one was even more blunt. "Just get him into bed. What's he going to do after that, Ron?" My face hardened as I listened to them. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind to what kind of people they were in my last life. But made sense. Birds of a feather flocked together. Ava had no morals, and neither did her friends. I was turning to leave when I heard her call my name. "Ethan." I looked back, my expression unchanged. She took that as an invitation and threw herself into my arms, looking up at me with a pathetic, pleading face. "Ethan," she whispered, "why won't you say anything? Are you still angry with me?" I slowly pushed her off me, my voice like ice. "Ava, you're a married woman." Her eyes lit up at my words. She pressed against me again, her voice giddy. "Ethan, are you jealous?" "Don't be." I called off the wedding. "I'm only going to marry you in this life." The sickly sweet act, the way she was grinding against me, it was all so pathetic it was almost funny. A cold laugh escaped my lips. "What on earth?" I asked, looking down at her. "Makes you think I'd ever marry a woman who left her groom at the altar?" She froze, stammering, I, unable to get a word out. Just then, James and her stepsister Hannah came around the corner. With them was another woman, dressed in a simple white dress. Her features were so perfect they looked like they were carved from marble, and her expression was just as cold and unmoving. She had an air of untouchable beauty, cool and distant. She gave me a passing glance and then looked away, dismissing me completely. I'll admit, I was intrigued, but it was a fleeting feeling. I pushed the door open and went back to my party, putting her out of my mind. Over the next few days, Ava showed up at my office trying to see me, but security turned her away every time. One afternoon, I was heading out and saw her making a scene in the lobby. "Do you have any idea who I am?" She was screaming at the receptionist. "I'm going to be Mrs. Anderson. You'll all be fired when Ethan hears about this." She was holding a fancy lunchbox and wearing the kind of light, natural makeup she always assumed was my favorite. We'd known each other our whole lives, and she was always so sure she knew everything about me. She was dressed like a college girl, probably thinking I still went for that innocent, simple look. The moment she saw me walking across the lobby, she rushed over. She shot a smug look back at the security guards. "See that?" she sneered. "Ethan came down to get me himself. You're all so fired." I smoothly pulled my arm from her grip and addressed the head of security. "From now on, if anyone causes a scene and disrupts business, have them removed," I said calmly. "If it happens more than once, call the police." I turned to leave without a second glance in her direction. I could feel her staring at my back, her lip trembling, her eyes welling with tears. She grabbed my arm again, her voice a desperate whisper. "You really don't love me anymore? But you've loved me for so long." A humorless smile touched my lips. "I guess I was blind back then," I said, my voice dripping with scorn. I pulled my arm free and walked away. I couldn't comprehend her audacity. She had personally ruined my life for another man, had literally killed me, and now she thought she still had a right to be with me? In my past life, that last shred of affection I had for her vanished the moment I learned she'd handed over a decade of my life's work to James, all because she was hopelessly love-struck. I also knew there was no point in taking revenge on a woman so blinded by what she thought was love. The one who truly destroyed me was James, and in this life, I wouldn't let him get away with it. I would make his end 100 times worse than mine. My firewall code was still missing one final component. The encryption key was proprietary technology owned by a single company in the entire country. And today, I was on my way to meet its legendary founder. In my past life, I stubbornly tried to develop the key myself, thinking I could brute force a solution. But this time I knew better. The final key belonged to one company, Burn Tech. If I could license their technology, Zeus Tech could launch the AI brain immediately, with its security completely ironclad. That's why I was seeking a partnership. I'd heard the man had a daughter he adored, so I came prepared with a gift, a custom necklace of sapphires and rare white jade. I'd paid a fortune for it at a Sotheby's auction, wanting to make a good first impression. When the door to the estate opened, I froze. The woman standing in the doorway was the beautiful, cold woman in the white dress from the restaurant. She wasn't wearing any makeup, but she was still stunning. Her long, dark hair was pulled into a loose braid over one shoulder, which softened her features a bit. She looked at me, and I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, but her voice was flat. "Who are you?" For some reason, I felt a knot of nervousness in my stomach and straightened my posture. "My name is Ethan Anderson," I said. "I have a meeting with Mr. Byrne." She nodded and stepped aside to let me in. She was wearing a simple dress and led me through the house, her pace steady and calm, the hem of her dress swaying to reveal a glimpse of her slender ankles. The Byrne estate in Greenwich wasn't ostentatious. It had an understated, classic elegance, not the kind of flashy mansion you'd expect from a tech billionaire. I figured this woman must be the daughter he was so proud of, and that thought, for some reason, made me even more tense. When we got to his study, Mr. Byrne was at his desk, practicing calligraphy. He put down his pen and greeted me warmly. I handed him the gift box. "A small token for my first visit," I said. "I heard you have a daughter you're very proud of, so I hope you'll both enjoy it." Mr. Byrne studied me for a moment with an appreciative glint in his eye. He nodded, then passed the box to the woman beside me, his expression softening with affection. "Very thoughtful of you, Mr. Anderson," he said. "This is my daughter, Luciana. We call her Lucy." "Lucy, this is Ethan Anderson, the CEO of Zeus Tech," he continued. "I'm sure you two have plenty to discuss. Young people's business." With a smile, he turned back to his desk and picked up his pen. Luciana set the box aside and turned to me, her voice cool and even. "I know why you're here, Mr. Anderson," she said. "We should talk." I was about to respond when her father added, without looking up from his desk, "The licensing rights for the firewall key belong to Lucy, not me. It's her creation from her time at MIT. I'm just an old man who can't keep up anymore." I nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Byrne." I followed Luciana into the adjoining library, and she closed the door behind us. I felt that strange nervousness again and found myself unable to meet her gaze. Her voice was as calm as ever. "Marry me," she said. "Give me a child, and make me a shareholder in Zeus Tech. Do that, and the license is yours." My head shot up. I was speechless. She wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder. But I could see a faint blush creeping up her neck and the tips of her ears, and though her beautiful face was set, I could detect the slightest tremor of nerves. News of our engagement spread like wildfire, seen by the market as a sign of a major partnership between BurnTech and Zeus Tech. The plan was to leverage the publicity of our wedding to launch the AI brain. The product had already passed all internal tests and was ready to go. I was on my way to the hospital to tell my mother the news. As I pulled up, I saw Ava crouched by the entrance, wearing a simple white dress, her eyes puffy and red from crying. She looked up when she saw me, her expression fragile. "Ethan, is it true?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Are you really getting engaged?" The words were barely out of her mouth before fresh tears started to fall. I just nodded, my face impassive. "Who is this Luciana? I've never even heard you talk about her," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "Are you still mad at me, Ethan? Did you just find some random person to make me jealous?" The thought was so absurd, I almost laughed. Had she completely lost her mind? I found myself defending Luciana without a second thought. "Watch your mouth," I said coldly. "Ms. Byrne is about to become a major shareholder and the chief scientist at my company. She doesn't need your approval. You're giving her stock?" Ava shrieked. "You never gave me any stock." I gave her one last look, too tired to argue, and headed inside. She tried to follow, but my security detail stopped her. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Luciana. "I'm nearby," she said. "Would it be all right if I came to visit your mother?" "Where are you?" "I'll meet you out front," I said, turning back toward the entrance. Ava trailed behind me like a ghost. When I met Luciana at the entrance, I realized it was the third time our paths had crossed that day. She was wearing a crisp, tailored pantsuit, looking sharp and professional, her expression as neutral as ever. She just nodded at me. She was holding 2 baskets of fruit, and when I took them from her, our fingers touched. I was surprised to feel a slight tremor in her hand. I had to hide a smile. She seemed so calm and collected, but she was nervous. I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest. Trying to put her at ease, I asked, "What brings you to this part of town?" "I was having lunch with a friend nearby," she answered quietly. "I remembered your mother was here, so I thought I would pay a visit." I nodded. I had told her about my mom's condition. Neither of us were big talkers, so we walked in comfortable silence. Just as we reached the elevators, Ava appeared out of nowhere. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she glared at me like a wife who'd just caught her husband cheating. She pointed a shaking finger at Luciana and me. "It's her, isn't it?" she shrieked. "What's so special about her, Ethan? Don't ruin your life just to get back at me." You didn't marry her in our last life," she sobbed. "You're back too, aren't you, Ethan? I love you." I was about to walk right past her, but Luciana turned to me with a genuinely puzzled expression. "I thought this was the cardiology wing," she said. "Did they move the psychiatric unit?" I couldn't help it. A smile tugged at my lips. "Good question." Ava lunged toward us, and I instinctively moved Luciana behind me. "That's enough, Ava," I said, my voice hard. "You're scaring my fiancé." "What does she have that I don't?" Ava wailed. "We grew up together. We have 20 years of history between us. You loved me for so long, and I love you. How could you change so suddenly? Is it because of this other woman?" "Watch your mouth," I warned, my voice dropping. "You insult my fiancé again, and you'll regret it." Luciana appeared around my shoulder, her expression one of genuine confusion. "Oh, I remember her from the restaurant," she said. "Isn't she the one who just got married?" I had to bite back a laugh. She was so earnest, so unintentionally funny, that my anger just melted away. Not wanting to waste another second on Ava, I reached for Luciana's hand and laced my fingers through hers. She tensed for a second as our hands touched, and I started to pull away, but then her fingers tightened around mine. "Let's go," she said, her voice firm. "We're wasting time." She didn't look back at Ava, didn't ask a single question. The scene had attracted attention, and hospital security arrived to handle Ava. I led Luciana toward the elevators, squeezing her hand gently. "It's over," I said. We were alone in the elevator. My palm was a little damp, but Luciana didn't let go. "Your mother," she began, her voice quiet and laced with a nervousness she was trying to hide. "What kind of girl do you think she'll like?" "My mom likes who I like," I said, my eyes fixed on the digital display, my throat suddenly dry. "Oh," she said, so softly I almost didn't hear it. My mother's health had improved over the last few weeks. She was even able to sit up and eat on her own now. She and Luciana sat by her bedside, making small talk. Luciana was quiet by nature, but she answered all of my mother's questions and even told a few amusing anecdotes that made her laugh. Luciana's mother had died when she was young, and she'd been raised by her father. I could tell she genuinely enjoyed the warm, gentle conversation with an older woman. In that one afternoon, she probably said more to my mother than she had to me in our entire acquaintance. I was peeling an apple nearby when I saw my mother open the small jewelry box she always kept on her nightstand. Inside was a beautiful, translucent jade bracelet, set with a delicate trim of rose gold. It was a family heirloom from my grandmother, worth a fortune. Luciana looked completely flustered, shaking her head and holding up her hands in protest. It was the first time I'd ever seen her look anything less than perfectly composed. She shot me a desperate, pleading look, but I just smiled. "You should take it," I said. "My mom's been saving that for a future daughter-in-law." Unable to refuse my mother's insistence, Luciana let her slide the bracelet onto her wrist. I knew why she felt uncomfortable. Our marriage was, at its core, a business arrangement. Her father was getting on in years and had recently been diagnosed with early-stage liver cancer. He was desperate to see her settled and to hold a grandchild before he died. He'd been pushing her to go on dates, and she was getting desperate. Apparently, she'd remembered me from that night at the restaurant and decided I was a viable candidate. Since I needed her technology, our interests aligned. We agreed to marry, have a child, and once the baby was born and the stock and licensing agreements were finalized, we would quietly and amicably divorce. It was a win-win situation for me, so I agreed almost immediately. And since this was a partnership, I was completely transparent with her about my family's messy history. I told her how I lived with my mother after my parents' divorce, and how I built my company from the ground up. My father was a classic social climber. He married my mother for her money, and when he left her, he took most of her fortune with him to start a new life with his mistress and their son, James. The betrayal broke my mother's spirit. She fell into a deep depression, and her health slowly failed until she had to be hospitalized. It was only with my grandfather's financial backing that I was able to start my own company and build it into what it is today. With my grandfather's help, I grew Zeus Tech until it dwarfed my father's company, Anderson Corporation. After my mother left, Anderson Corp began to flounder. It's no surprise James, who recently took the reins, despises me. He's obsessed with beating me, as if that could somehow erase the fact that he's the illegitimate son. And the biggest irony of all is that he's with Ava, a woman who tried to run from their wedding into my arms. "Ethan, walk Lucy out, dear," my mother said. "You have work to do. Don't worry about me." I nodded, and as we stepped out of the room, Luciana's hand found mine. For the first time, I saw her brow crease with a hint of something other than calm indifference. "That woman, Ava," she said, a trace of an edge to her voice. "Is she really your childhood sweetheart?" I glanced at her and nodded. My mother must have told her. "Do you still love her?" she asked, turning her head away. Her voice was tight, with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "I don't want a husband who's in love with someone else. If you still have feelings for her, we can call this whole thing off right now. But you won't get the license." I didn't answer, just kept walking until we reached my car in the parking garage. She looked at me, surprised, and started to say something. "Get in," I interrupted. "Let's get something to eat." She fell silent and got into the passenger seat, staring out the window. "Seatbelt," I said. She gave me a strange look, but I ignored it. She sighed, clicked her seatbelt into place, and went back to watching the city lights blur past. I couldn't help but smile. After the third time she snuck a glance at me, I finally broke the silence. "I don't love her anymore," I said. She blinked, waiting for me to go on. I admitted. "But that ended the day. She chose to be with my father's illegitimate son." "Oh," she said, her voice perfectly even. But when I glanced over, I saw the hint of a smile playing on her lips. "What did she mean by our last life?" she asked. I answered, half joking. "It's a long story. Let's just say I was betrayed by the people I trusted most, and this time, I'm back to take what's mine. You want the details? Venmo me $20, and I'll tell you the whole story." We stopped at a red light, and I felt her soft fingers gently brush against the back of my hand. I turned to look at her, but she was already staring out her window as if nothing had happened. I smiled, flipped my hand over, and intertwined my fingers with hers. We didn't say another word the rest of the way, but I could feel that the tension had vanished. For our engagement party, Luciana wore the custom white gown I'd had made for her. The dress was cut to perfection, accentuating her cool, elegant beauty and making her look absolutely breathtaking. The first words out of my mouth when I saw her were, "You look incredible." She pretended she didn't hear me and tried to slip past, but I caught her by the waist, pulling her closer. She looked up at me, her clear, dark eyes blinking slowly. I felt an overwhelming urge to kiss her. And right at that moment, the door swung open. It was a woman I recognized, one of Luciana's friends from the restaurant. "Oops," she said with a dramatic flair, taking an hour pose. "Sorry to interrupt. Didn't mean to walk in on a moment." I glanced down at Luciana, whose cheeks were now a faint pink, and reluctantly let her go. I gave her friend a nod and excused myself from the room. There was still important business to attend to. I had to sign the equity agreement with Luciana, transferring 6% of Zeus Tech to her name. Our original deal was for 3%, a significant portion of my own 20% stake, but I'd had a last-minute change of heart. I didn't want this to be just a contract anymore. I was starting to genuinely hope that this could be real. Once the party was in full swing, Luciana and I made our rounds. The guest list was a who's who of the business world, with titans of industry from New York and D.C., old friends of my grandfather, and all of Mr. Burns' partners. My grandfather was there, too. He'd always had high expectations for me, even though he never forgave my mother for marrying a man with no money. I respected him deeply, which is why he holds a significant portion of the shares in my company. He watched Luciana and me, a look of satisfaction on his face. At that exact moment, a waitress stumbled, accidentally spilling an entire glass of red wine down the front of Luciana's white dress. A huge, ugly red stain bloomed across the fabric. The waitress was a mess of apologies, but when she glanced up, I saw it, a flicker of a triumphant smile. It was Ava. She was on her knees, making a show of dabbing at the stain with a filthy rag, only making it worse. Luciana's face was a mask of cold fury as she summoned the event manager. The room went quiet as all eyes turned in our direction. At the same time, my assistant rushed to my side. "Sir," he whispered urgently in my ear, "Anderson Corp just launched their AI brain." I looked down at Ava, still on the floor, now crying and muttering about how the rich always pick on the little guy. A hollow feeling settled in my chest. I always thought she was just naive, but I never imagined she could be this vicious. To think I wasted more than 10 years of my life on her. I took off my jacket and tied it around Luciana's waist, hiding the stain. "I brought a second dress for you, just in case," I whispered. "Go get changed." She nodded, giving Ava one last, dismissive look before her friend whisked her away. The buzz of the party quickly returned, the small drama already forgotten. I crouched down to Ava's level. "That was a cheap shot," I said, my voice low. "Trying to humiliate my fiancé like that. You're going to regret this." She looked up at me with a cold smile. "You came back too, didn't you?" she hissed. "You remember everything. Well, since you don't love me anymore, I could drop the act. Your company is about to go bankrupt, Ethan. Just like last time." I just smiled and shook my head. "If you know I'm back," I said softly, "did you really think I'd be unprepared? Did you really think you and James could pull the same trick on me twice?" Her eyes widened in shock. A slow, mocking smile spread across my face. You're pathetic, you know that. I said, you get a do-over, a second chance at life, and you still can't think of anything better to do than latch onto the nearest man. When you couldn't get me back, you crawled right back to James, the same man you publicly humiliated at your own wedding. Did you really think he'd forgive you for that? You destroyed his reputation in front of the entire city. With that, I stood up and walked away, leaving her there on the floor. I found Luciana, now changed in her second gown. It was a deep forest green that made her skin seem luminous and clung to her curves in all the right ways. The moment she stepped out, a wave of murmurs went through the room. She's breathtaking, someone whispered. Mr. Anderson is a lucky man. I smiled. Yes, I am, I said, my eyes on her. The luckiest. I leaned close to her ear. Miss Byrne, I murmured playfully, I'm afraid your fiancé's new product just got scooped by a competitor. The company's about to go under. Too late to back out of the engagement now, though. She looked up at me, a rare, playful glint in her eye. I suppose I'll have to call it off then, she said dryly. I pulled her closer. Too late, I whispered. Oh, woe is me, she said, her expression perfectly deadpan, and I laughed. A little later, when I handed her the finalized equity agreement, I saw her eyes widen. She looked from the paper up to me, as if checking to see if I'd written the number down wrong. I reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. Sign it, I said softly. Welcome aboard the pirate ship. I promise you won't regret it. It was for 25% of my total shares in the company. She bit her lip, then took the pen and signed her name. Anderson Corp rushed their AI brain to market. I watched the security footage of Ava, using her knowledge from our past life, easily accessing the server room and stealing the data. I had to give her credit. It was a flawless execution of a doomed plan. Did she really think I was that stupid? Did she think, knowing she was back too, that I would leave my most critical data in the exact same place, completely unprotected, for her to steal again? But the data she stole was a decoy. Unlike the stable prototype from our last life, the product Anderson Corp released was a buggy, unfinished mess. The neural connection was unstable. Users reported splitting headaches, nausea, and disorientation the moment they activated the device. It didn't take long for #AndersonCorpFail to start trending on Twitter. The public backlash was immediate and brutal. And right at the peak of the outrage, Zeus Tech released an official legal statement across all our platforms. The statement detailed a theft of corporate secrets, explicitly naming Anderson Corp as the perpetrator. We accused them of using stolen, proprietary code to rush an untested and dangerous product to market, putting consumers at grave risk. The story exploded. The feud between Anderson Corp and Zeus Tech was the biggest news in the country. Then, when the media frenzy was at its peak, I released a personal statement, written from my mother's perspective. It told the whole story. How my father, Lucas Anderson, was a classic gold digger who trapped my mother with an unplanned pregnancy. How after the wedding, he had affairs and subjected her to years of emotional abuse that drove her into a crippling depression. It explained how he used her family's money to start Anderson Corp, and how, once the company was a success, he threw my mother and me out of our home, and how he moved his mistress and their son, James, into our house the very next day. The statement then revealed that the person who had stolen the code from Zeus Tech was none other than James's new wife, Ava. It detailed how she had exploited our lifelong friendship and my trust in her to commit corporate espionage. I even included the security footage as proof. But the real nail in the coffin was when someone, somewhere, leaked the video from the wedding. The whole world could now see Ava leaving James at the altar to run to me. A messy, high-society love triangle was far more interesting to the public than corporate theft. Anderson Corp stock went into a freefall. James and Ava became the most hated couple in America. At 6 p.m. sharp, our press conference began. I stood at the podium in a dark suit, with Luciana at my side in a chic, professional dress, facing a sea of flashing cameras. We held hands, our engagement rings catching the light. The news of the official partnership between Zeus Tech and Burn Tech was announced, and the world learned for the first time that the true genius behind BurnTech's innovations was Luciana. Halfway through the conference, Luciana presented a document of her own. It was an equity agreement transferring 4% of BurnTech into my name. BurnTech was a corporate giant, orders of magnitude larger than Zeus Tech. That 4% was worth exponentially more than the 25% I had given her. I stared at her, completely stunned. She bit her lip and leaned in to whisper, "Well, I'm on the pirate ship now. I figured I should bring something to the table." I took the portfolio from her and leaned in to kiss her on the cheek. Her ears flushed a deep red. "Message received, fiancé," I murmured. The cameras went off like a thunderstorm. Then Luciana and I turned back to the audience and officially unveiled the real AI brain. I explained the device's revolutionary capabilities, and she detailed the unbreachable security of her proprietary firewall. We had just unveiled the most secure, advanced biotechnology on the planet. The online buzz about the AI brain exploded to an unprecedented level. Zeus Tech and BurnTech became the hottest names in tech overnight, all over the world. We moved into the beta testing phase, live streaming the results. The footage showed test subjects connected directly to the internet, sending messages and browsing websites using only their thoughts. And thanks to the multi-layered firewall, their data and privacy were completely secure. On launch day, our first run of 1 million AI brain units sold out in under 5 minutes. Luciana and I had one. It was a total victory. The day before my wedding, I got a call from Ava. She and James had been on the run, hiding out somewhere in Chicago, too scared to make a break for it. While she talked, I was already using my own AI brain interface to triangulate her position and send an anonymous tip to the Chicago PD, all while recording the call. She was crying on the other end of the line. "Ethan, I know you're getting married tomorrow," she sobbed. "Please, for my grandmother's sake, just meet me one last time. I'm begging you." Ava's grandmother had been a source of great kindness in my childhood. My own father was absent, and my mother was always ill, so on many lonely nights, her grandmother was the one who took me in and cared for me. On her deathbed, I had promised her I would always look after Ava. That promise was the reason I had been so devoted to her in her last life. I let out a long sigh. I agreed to meet her. I went back to the same rooftop, the one she had pushed me from in our last life. Ava and James were already there. James was unshaven and gaunt, a shadow of the arrogant man he used to be. Ava was in cheap, ragged clothes, her hair a tangled mess. They had clearly fallen on hard times. She laughed when she saw me, a hysterical sound that quickly turned into sobs. "Ethan," she choked out, "you're still such an idiot. If you had just chosen me, none of this would have happened," she cried. "But don't worry. You're about to get what you deserve." Her smile vanished. Together, she and James started backing me toward the rusted guardrail at the edge of the roof. I watched them, my expression calm, as if I were observing two animals in a cage. "Just seeing you both for who you really are has made this life worthwhile," I said to Ava. "And for the record, even if I had 1,000 chances, I would never choose you." I turned my gaze to James, my voice dripping with contempt. "Your mother was a mistress," I said. "And now you know what it feels like to be the cuckolded husband, just like your father. How does it feel, James? To be betrayed by the woman you love? It seems being the other woman runs in the family." "Shut up," James bellowed, his face contorted with rage. I had hit a nerve. "You're about to die, and you're still running your mouth?" He lunged forward and grabbed me by the collar. "If it wasn't for you, I would have been the heir to the Anderson fortune. Why did your mother get to be the respected wife, while mine was treated like trash? You're nothing without your rich grandfather," he spat. I laughed in his face. "Is that so? Then why did you need to marry a woman for her inheritance, just to keep Anderson Corp from going under? When have you ever accomplished anything without a woman's money?" I taunted. "You cheat, you steal, and now you're even letting a woman plan your murders for you. Is that all you are, James? A parasite who lives off women?" His eyes bulged with fury. "And you're any better?" he screamed. "You married the burn girl for her connections. You're just a trophy husband, a joke." I just smiled. "I'm married for love, James," I said calmly. "Something you wouldn't understand. And if I'm a trophy husband, at least I'm the trophy husband of a brilliant CEO who happens to be one of the richest people in the world. And who did you marry? I continued, my voice soft and cruel. A high school dropout who couldn't even get into a community college. Shut up, Ava screamed. Just kill him. In the next instant, the rooftop door burst open and the police swarmed in, tackling them to the ground. At the same time, a figure rushed past the officers and straight into my arms. It was Luciana. Her beautiful face was pale with terror, her eyes red-rimmed. For the first time since I'd met her, she completely lost her composure, pounding her fists against my chest. "Ethan," she cried, "what were you thinking? Did you want me to go to our wedding alone tomorrow? This was so dangerous. Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Do you think you're immortal? You are my fiancé. Do you understand what that means? You report to me now." I caught her hands and pulled her tight against me, burying my face in her hair. "I understand, Mrs. Anderson-to-be," I whispered. "I promise. No more secrets. Our wedding was an intimate affair, just close friends and family." Luciana wore a custom gown by an Italian designer, and in the sunlight, she looked like an angel. Her father walked her down the aisle. I stood at the altar and said my vows, every word coming straight from my soul. She looked into my eyes, and with a clear, steady voice, she said, "I do." In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. My mother was in the front row, crying tears of joy. My grandfather looked over at her, sighed, and gently patted her shoulder. I pulled Luciana into my arms and finally kissed her. This time I'd gotten it right. "Ethan," Luciana murmured later, curled up against me, her cheeks flushed. I thought this was just a contract. I smiled, looking at the faint love bite on her neck. "Funny," I said, "your dad told me at the reception that his cancer has been in remission for months." She went completely still in my arms, and I could feel the heat rising from her skin. "And your best friend," I continued, "told me you've had a crush on me since that night at the restaurant. So this whole arrangement was just an elaborate scheme to get me to marry you, wasn't it?" She felt like she was burning up in my arms. I laughed softly and kissed her again. The sun was streaming through the window, bright and warm. I was holding the love of my life, and everything was perfect. True rebirth isn't about going back in time. It's about breaking free from your own chains and rebuilding yourself. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but building a life so far beyond their reach that they become irrelevant. This story shows that real love is a partnership that builds you both up, not a one-way street of sacrifice. Don't waste time trying to make others regret what they did. The best answer to the past is to live an extraordinary life. You're the main character of your story, always.